Hello and welcome back to the Cannon Sports Podcast. I am your host, Ryan from Cannon Sports, and joining me today in the studio, NFL free agent Case Cookus. Case, thanks so much for stopping by, man.
Thanks for having me.
So, Case, let's start at the start. Where are you from?
From Thousand Oaks, California.
All right.
I moved there when I was about 5, so
Okay.
it's been there a while now.
All right, man. And how long you been playing football?
Oh, that's since 5th grade.
Fifth grade. All right. What first drew you to the game of football?
So I always wanted to play football, and my mom wouldn't let me. And 5th grade was the year she finally let me play. And I was a baseball guy, kind of growing up my whole career. And kind of played my first year, played wide receiver. All the guys above me, they kind of moved up to the next division. And they were like, hey, who could throw a ball? I was like, I threw baseballs. I could maybe throw a football. And so that's kind of when it started. And quarterback position was just so hard, but it was a lot of fun. You had to touch the ball every play, give it to playmakers, all this stuff. So just like I kind of fell in love with it as I progressed through years playing different positions, but also playing the quarterback position. Got
it, man. So I have down here, Thousand Oaks High School, you were named the MVP of the 41st Ventura County High School Football All-Star Game.
Yeah, that was laughing about that earlier. I hadn't been talked about that in a while, but yeah, that was a fun game because the Thousand Oaks coaches were actually the coaches for the game, so it was a lot of fun. I got to kind of be with a bunch of guys from around the county, really good players, all going different Division I's, things like that. But it was a fun game, and glad I got to participate.
Awesome, man. Now, I've always wondered this. Now, for myself, I went to Damien High School out in Laverne. I've talked about this before. I played water polo. Me playing water polo was more just like summer before freshman year. I was looking for a way to stay in shape. And I had a buddy who played water polo. He was like, hey, come down. You can, go swimming. I was like, great. And I ended up playing all 4 years. I did not start, I don't think, a game ever. Actually, you know what? They let me start my senior year. But, like, if we stood up, hopefully this looks all right on camera. But I'm about 5'10". You're 6'2", I'm guessing.
I'm 6'3" and something. I like to say 6'4", though, so 6'4".
6'4", there you go. But anyway, I say all that to say, like, I was never a star athlete. I kind of knew, like, I was doing water polo as a recreational activity. I knew there was nothing beyond it. For a guy like you, who went on to play in college, who went on to have some experience in the NFL and is still, training for the NFL, at what point in time did you know, like, I got something here? Like, I got a little something here.
Yeah, that's tough. So, like, my whole sports career, leading into high school, it was a lot of just for fun, meeting new people, kind of learning as you go through life, of just, like, dealing with some of the hard things that sports teach you, dealing with wins and success and losses and things like that. And then I got into high school, and like I said earlier, baseball was always my sport, so I was like, I was going to play baseball. And I played baseball, basketball, football, and it wasn't until my sophomore year where we were getting into, like, the football playoffs, and they usually bring up a couple guys to be on varsity, and varsity that year had made the playoffs, so I was one of the guys they had brought up, and I was super excited, and I was kind of just an extra arm, right? So the quarterbacks are taking the reps and all this stuff, and I would go throw to the wide receivers and things like that. And I worked with my quarterback coach and Coach Lieben, the head coach, a lot. And I kind of started to realize I could spin the ball with some of these guys. Like, this is a lot of fun, and I'm spinning it pretty good. And that's kind of when I started to realize that there might be something there. My parents, didn't know too much about the process of getting scholarships and things like that. So we were kind of a little behind the 8 ball in that aspect. But it was right around that sophomore year where I thought maybe I could keep doing this. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. And I had never really thought about that aspect of it until that year when I started playing with those older guys, and I liked the challenge of it and things like that. And from there, going into my junior year, I actually had to switch to wide receiver because we had a really good quarterback that was a senior. And I was like, well, you can't replace this guy. He just threw for like 3,000 yards and all that stuff. And so I understood, and I sat the first game of my junior year, and I was like, man, I want to play. Like, I was like, I love this game. I want to play. So I went to coach. I was like, hey, coach, like, can I go play a different position? I'll still be the backup. Like, I'm cool with that. And started transitioning me over to wide receiver. And from that, I think I was able to appreciate the complexity of football so much. You know, every position is so different and so challenging. And that's, you know, I like falling in love with the game. You know, as a quarterback, you kind of, you know, get there and you're throwing the ball. You're like, wide receiver, you're talking to your wide receivers. Why didn't he get that one? All this stuff. And then I was like, okay, I get it now. You know, I get it. You know, you get pressed up on the line and things like that. It's like, I kind of understood it. So it was kind of during that sophomore to junior year and was able to transition. And then my senior year was able to play a lot of quarterback, and it was a lot of fun. So it's just that high school, you know, sophomore and junior season stuff.
Cool, man. And that's interesting. So outside of like an appreciation for the different positions and everything, I got to imagine as a quarterback now playing wide receiver, did that teach you anything about the game that you were able to take back to the quarterback position and realize a couple things?
Yeah, absolutely. You sit there, and I kind of mentioned earlier, as a quarterback, I don't think you fully realize what the wide receivers are going through all the time, right? So when they come back and you think they're making an excuse, but it's like in reality, like, you know, you could be slipping out there. They could be a really good DB. There could be a funky look that you can't really tell on, you know, as a quarterback that what's going on happening out there on the edge. So that's where, you know, I learned to communicate really well with those guys too. It was like, hey, look, like, talk to me. What are you getting? What leverage are you getting? All this stuff, all the little things. And I realized how much those little things really matter when it comes to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, at what so junior year, you end up playing wide receiver. Then senior year, you're back at quarterback. I'm assuming you have a pretty good year. I mean, you know, I'm assuming, you know, you played in the All-Star game. You get named MVP. At what point do you start getting attention from colleges?
So through that junior year, I had started going to some college camps and trying to get kind of my name out there and things like that. For me, what was hard was I didn't have a lot of junior year quarterback film. And that's usually, I guess I wouldn't say nowadays, but, you know, back then that was usually when you got your offers. Nowadays you can get a college offer at 8th grade. So it's crazy, right? Yeah, so for me, kind of back in that, you know, sophomore, junior year, that's kind of when the big schools started offering their quarterback positions. And so for me, I actually didn't have a lot of looks. I had to go to those camps to get my name out there. And I actually ended up going to a junior college, Ventura Community College, before I ended up transferring to NAU. And so that process was a little weird and a little different because, like I said, I didn't have any film. So the point of going to the junior college is to get some film and play. And so I was talking to my coach, and we gray shirted me because I was a little bit undersized too. So coming out of high school, I was 6'2", and I was maybe 175 pounds, Oof. Maybe, you know, so I was real skinny. And so after talking to my coach, he thought it was a really good idea to gray shirt me and get me bigger and kind of turn me into a real prospect. And so through that gray shirt year, I gained 20 pounds, you know, grew a couple inches out of high school. You know, I got a little lucky there. Yeah. But, you know, so I ended up getting to that, you know, full 6'4".
There you go.
For everyone watching there. And so I got to that full 6'4", 195 pounds. I started kind of turning into a prospect. And before I even got a chance to play, NAU had came and offered me. They wanted a junior college guy. Well, you know, it kind of worked out the best for both of us is they had 2 seniors and 2 freshmen, and they wanted kind of that middle guy, that filler. And I was kind of more of a freshman than I was a junior guy, but I went to their camp and I fell in love with the city, the coaching staff, and just the whole process. And it was awesome from there.
Awesome, man. So you go Thousand Oaks High School, then you go to the JC, and then you're at NAU, Northern Arizona University. Now I have down 2015, which would have been your first year at NAU.
Yeah, that was
3,100 yards, 37 touchdowns. You're named the freshman player of the year, and you're given the Jerry Rice Award, which is for FCS competition. That's a hell of a first year in college. What is that experience like? I mean, what is it like going from high school competition to now college competition and having that much success?
Yeah, I think I got a little lucky with that buffer of that junior college year of like kind of being with older guys, right? Because when you're in that junior college, you'll have 18-year-olds all the way up to like 30-year-olds, coming back and still have eligibility and all that stuff. So you kind of have to mature fast in something like that because you're playing against some older guys. You could be playing against a guy that came back from USC and who's a stud, who's transferring, to his next school, and you're like, you got to kind of handle that, and learn how to talk to him, because they have so much more life experience and football experience than you. So you kind of have to mature fast in that situation. And so I learned so much there. And so when I got offered from NAU, 3 weeks later, we're going into football camp. And so you had to progress quickly. And so that time at junior college kind of prepared me for catching up faster. And, it is tough, but for the most part, it was that kind of buffer year at Ventura, that really prepared me and helped launch me to that. And, the Jared Rice Award and all this stuff, that ended up happening because NAU was set up. I kind of walked into the perfect situation. I walked into a senior running back, a senior wide receiver, a senior tight end, a pretty veteran offensive line. And then I had another star wide receiver who ended up catching 15 touchdowns. And so I kind of walked into a lucky situation, but at the same time, they wanted someone to operate their offense. And I was kind of that guy. And like I said, that year at Ventura helped me progress through and kind of, again, a step back from the game and was able to see it at a different perspective.
Absolutely. Now, I've talked to a few people on this podcast and a few people, just in my personal experiences that have told me that the biggest difference from each new level is the speed and the strength. Going from high school, then to the junior college, then to the college. I mean, was that something that was noticeable to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something where you don't realize. I think it's the mistakes is what really shines through, where in high school you can get away with mistakes, right? In college you can get away with a few mistakes,
sure,
right? And then as you progress into the NFL, you might be able to get away with one mistake here and there, but the punishment of the sport really starts amping up, right? You can't just sit there in high school and okay, I'm going to break this play and run for 60 yards. Okay, in college, it's like, okay, I might be able to break that play and maybe get 10 yards. In the NFL, it's like, I'm not going to even be able to break this play. So I got to be able to operate, at a high efficiency. And so that's the thing I've noticed the most is those mistakes get punished just so hard. And it is because of the speed and the strength and all that stuff. Everyone's, in college, we always say, hey, they're on scholarship too when they make a good play. As an NFL, well, they're all getting paid too, right? So it's like, they're getting paid a lot of money to do what they're doing. So you can't take anything for granted in that aspect.
Yeah. Now stepping from Thousand Oaks into NAU, what was the offense that you were being asked to run?
So Coach Plow, he kind of had a West Coast style approach. We kind of mixed an up tempo with the old kind of true West Coast style. So we had a lot of under center stuff, 2 tight end. We had a fullback set and things like that, but we wanted to also have the up tempo stuff. So we kind of kept the defense on the toes. We realized that whatever we showed to the defense, they had to prepare for. So we had a few off balance formations and things like that where we would kind of take advantage of things we saw in the defense. So we tried to kind of have a solid mix of it all. And we mixed in the RPO game and that, everything that the colleges are running now. But for the most part, we also wanted to run that old school stuff where you got in the center, ran the ball, got into good checks and things like that. And so our offense was pretty solid, overall. We could do it all, run the ball, throw the ball short, long, those explosive plays, and it kind of progressed from that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that sounds like obviously had a lot of success with it, really, and yet it's very complex. What is your learning curve, or as you're stepping into this new offense? What is the learning curve of studying the playbook, studying the game film? I mean, what is that time commitment like on top of all the classes?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest things about learning a playbook is you have to understand how you learn. So for me, being able to walk through it on a football field and run the play is very helpful, right? And so at colleges in the summer, you kind of are able to have a little bit of time with your team to do those things, right? So you get a list of plays, you go out in the mornings and you run through your plays and kind of you're able to see it, right? Even with the other guys going, right? You're taking first team reps or second team reps or third team reps. So those 3 sets of reps, you're able to see the play run. And I think you can learn a lot from that situation. So, I run a play, and then say the second string guy, he runs a play and he runs it slightly different, and it works, and so you kind of, every piece of information you can gain from that was how I learned better. Now some guys, they'll get on the chalkboard and they like doing the chalkboard. So some guys could just see the picture and go and just picture it in their head. So for me, it was going out and visualizing it out on the field was helped me the most.
Yeah, definitely, man. Now, at what point in your career at NAU do you start thinking, I can take this to the next level?
I think as you get to that college level, I think people mention it a lot more. I think you have a good game here and there. There's a lot of, I guess, over exaggerations in what you do. So, you come out and you have a first game. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy's gonna, be the next, Drew Brees or Peyton Manning and all that stuff. And so you kind of have to ignore that stuff because when it comes down to it, you got to finish, 3 years of football before you go try to, take on that next challenge. So I tried to not get caught up in that kind of stuff. I knew after my first season and after winning some of those awards, I think is when it actually hit me. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I might be able to do this. And I had fallen so much in love with the game, and I had so much fun with my offensive coordinator, with all the guys that I was playing with. And so I realized that I wanted to chase that feeling and loved the game, So I think it was after that first season for me, but a lot of it is hard to ignore, but you kind of have to ignore a lot of that because you can't go to the NFL right away. You got to play a few seasons, right? If you just sit there and think, well, I'm going to the NFL, you're not going to be able to win games throughout your career.
Absolutely. Now, as you progress in your college career and you do start now thinking of that next level of the NFL, is there a change in the workout? Is there a change in the diet, the mentality? I mean, really now looking at the NFL is the goal, and I think it's accomplishable. What are all the little things that are going to propel you to the next level at that point?
I think, one of the biggest things is in college, you have your whole life planned out, I guess, right? Or planned for you, right? So you sit there, you wake up at, whatever hour, 6 o'clock, you go to lift, you go to practice, you do your classes for the day. That's when then you do your homework later. So like that is all planned out. You don't have a couple hours to sit there and not do anything. So for me, one of the hardest things was to plan it myself. Is you sit there and you plan your day, and you're doing it yourself. So you got to make sure. Okay, I'm working out this time. Okay, I got my receivers. Because they're not obligated to do anything for you. So make sure they show up. Make sure your guys are all set. You have to take it upon yourself to do the stretching, to do your diet and things like that. And so I think to me that was one of the hardest things, and that was something I tried to really focus on. And it still is a very hard thing to do. Like even today, trying to set up things and get wide receivers going. There's football going on right now. I'm not on a team, but there's the guys that I usually throw with are on teams. So you got to just find a way to go out there and throw.
Yeah. Now, as your career at NAU is finishing up, and you're looking, are you looking at the combine? Are you looking at a pro day? Are you looking towards the draft? What's the whole process of really trying to make that transition?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that happens is you start getting some calls, agents, marketing people, all these things. And it's kind of a little bit overwhelming at first, that part of it of like, who can I trust? Who can I not trust? I've everyone's just telling you good things about yourself, and you just have no idea. You're like, oh, first round, oh, third round, oh, you're not going to get drafted. You're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I don't know, so you kind of, you get reached out to a lot. And so you kind of have to, the first thing you gotta do is kind of start digging through and researching some things. And luckily my family was so nice and supportive through, and they were able to, I was able to talk to my dad, talk to my mom, and kind of had conversations about this stuff. And when it comes down to it, your career is kind of in their hands a little too, because they're the ones making the calls on behalf of you.
Sure.
When you get that agent and things like that. So that's kind of the first step. And then from there, you kind of have to plan out your workout things and your training, and from there. So the training, we had a pretty good strength coach there at NAU. The training's similar, but then you're training for you get to run a 40 one time,
right.
And it's like, well, does it really matter? But to the NFL it does. So for me, that's when I started doing that training, was once I found my agent. We set up the workout schedule and things like that. You're training for these things that are football applicable, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's tough. So that part was super frustrating to me because when I was doing that, that's when COVID started, and we didn't do a pro day. We didn't do any the combine happened, but I didn't get a combine invite. So like throughout that whole first season of the 2020 draft would have been my draft class. I didn't get to showcase my skill. So I did all this training and all this time that I spent, and I didn't run my 40 in front of him. I didn't do any shuttles. I didn't do any of this. So we had to, I had to take John out there and film a pro day to try to get, people to see what I'm bringing to their team and things like that. So it was tough because you kind of set it up, and then all of a sudden COVID hit. It kind of shattered everyone's plans.
Yeah, and it's so crazy because, I mean, it's not that long ago, but like COVID just disrupted so many things. And I think, obviously a lot of us know how it disrupted our work, how it disrupted our lives. And then for you coming out of college, like this is the start of your NFL career. And all of a sudden, bang, this thing's dropped on you. I mean, what's going through your head? Are you thinking like, I've got to make some adjustments? I mean, what's the process of then having to deal with this added layer of the COVID season?
Yeah, it's tough because, in all honesty, I didn't know what to do. You're sitting there, or I'm sitting there as this guy coming out of college, and I had already declared, I already signed with an agent. I can't sit there and go back. So I was caught in this no man's land. And like I said, we set up some film, we set up this, but a lot of it is just trusting your agent to make those calls and get you those opportunities. And we were very fortunate enough to have the Giants call, 15 minutes after the draft, and I was undrafted to the Giants. And so it was something where I got an opportunity where some guys might not have gotten an opportunity. So I was super thankful for that in the first off. But then, it's tough because then you go into this training period where I did, a couple months of just Zoom. I didn't get to play football in front of anyone. So I didn't do a pro day. I didn't do the combine or anything like that. So I'm sitting there and not being able to showcase my skill. And, I'm 6'4", I'm a taller guy, but it's not like I'm some 6'6" big quarterback. Looks really good, So I have to impress people with what I do on the field. And so that was what was frustrating to me was I wasn't able to showcase my skill because I'm like, hey, you want to come see me throw, but they can't. They're operating in what the NFL rule set were. So we were doing all the Zoom stuff. And so for me, that was where the frustrating came in. Because I didn't get to show anyone what I could do, and that, for me, just coming out of the college, I'm just super excited, ready to play. And I didn't get to play. And I was like, oh man, I really want to show you what I could throw, and all this stuff. But it's the COVID part was frustrating. And obviously, thankful my family was safe and all that stuff. So you can't sit there and complain about it because this was something that you can't control. And a lot of people were affected from it. So, but just from the football side, even this year, we did a hub camp where a lot of guys who were 1 year out, second year maybe, were in the same exact situation. So it was kind of nice to talk to guys and see that you're kind of not alone in your struggles. You sit there and talking to some of the quarterbacks, and it was like almost everyone's story was the same thing. I got undrafted free agent, but team had to make the roster cut to 90 from 90 to 80 before they were even really able to practice. Before they really get to see you play at all. Yeah, so it was really tough, and you could ask there was a couple hundred guys there, and I would argue that 150 of the guys were in pretty much the same exact situation. Yeah. So it was really the whole situation was really weird, and going out, not even your agent really knew what to do or who to call, and because they're kind of handcuffed by the rule set of the NFL and who could be on the team, who couldn't, the numbers and all that stuff. So it was a weird situation. Yeah, definitely. Now you mentioned it, but so you go undrafted in the 2020 draft, but then you're contacted 15 minutes after the draft by the New York Giants. Yep. Is it relief? Is it excitement? Is it exuberation? I mean, it's the call that I think probably for 90% of us, that grow up watching football, it's a call we all have imagined, and maybe 1% of us get that call. You got that call. What's it like? Yeah, I think it's a relief at first. You know, I think because undrafted, you're unsure at first. So, you know, the first thought, you know, draft ends, you're like, am I good enough? What's going to happen? There's a little bit of doubt that kind of creeps in. And then from there, you get that call and you get that, you know, kind of confirmation. Okay, we got that. We got an opportunity. And for me, that was the biggest thing because I was like, I have an opportunity. I can showcase my skills. I'm super excited. And that's where kind of, like I said, the relief kind of came through. And then it was like, okay, let's get to work. And you know, let's go. Okay, playbook, iPad, you know, like what can I get now? You know, what do you guys want to send me? I'm ready to go. So that was the first your relief, excitement, and then it's like, okay, let's go. Because it is a job. You know, what it comes down to is you know, you're getting paid to then play football. So it's, you know, let's do your job and do it efficiently, and let's move on and start getting ready to roll.
Absolutely. Now you're talking about it like at first it's all Zoom. It's got to be super frustrating, but like you're saying, it's a job. You're focused. At what point, you know, do you report for camp?
So last year was different. So if you have anyone else in the NFL or other guys later in the podcast, they might have a different story than mine, right? So the 2020 draft, what we did, and I think pretty much every team was very similar to this. So we went on Zoom from basically draft day. You had 1 week, and then you were on Zoom for a full, pretty much until July. So April to July, you were on Zoom. And then from July, you have about a month off. This is my experience. You had about a month off, and then they were still unsure at that time, but then they reported for camp June, July, August. So August sometime is when we reported for camp. And in August, what we did is we quarantined for a week in New York for me. Yeah. So we quarantined for a full week. And basically the rule was you had to test, and then you had to have 3 days of a negative test. Yeah. And then you tested again. If you both of those were negative, then you were allowed to go in and get your physical. Once you did that, so that's pretty much about a full week of stuff. But it was tough because I went to New York, again, you're all excited, ready to play football, and I just sat in a hotel room for a week.
You're just quarantining, right?
Yeah. So you quarantined for the week. It was really weird. Basically they gave us a stipend, and we would order food, and I just walked down to the hotel desk, pick up my food, go back up to my room. And so the hotel premise, like they told us not to leave it, and you were able to kind of walk around outside, and maybe sometimes go to the gym, but you weren't allowed. Like, so obviously there's a lot of guys there, so like you couldn't be in there if there's too many guys in there. So like, you're kind of like waiting for gym time and things like that. You're like, okay, but so that part was really weird. I think it was the first time since I had been, picked up by the Giants that I didn't like do anything for a week, pretty much. Like it was like just trying to like work out at the hotel and just like sit around and like study the playbook. So that part was like it was really weird, the whole dynamic. And then the next week they called it an acclimation period, where you just conditioned, and then you were able to throw the ball a little bit. So like during that conditioning period, but like we didn't throw like routes on air or things like that. It was just like one route here and there. It was more of like a conditioning thing. And then we did walkthroughs later in the day, and then a bunch of meetings throughout there. So that was like the first 2 weeks. And then after those first 2 weeks, the NFL said you have to cut the roster to 80. And so with only throwing about 20 balls for the Giants, I got cut because I was the fifth quarterback. Yeah. And so that was I think the biggest bummer was like I was like, I only threw like 20 balls. Yeah. You know, and so that part was real tough. So mine was very, very different. Yeah. This next year it got back to a little normal, more normal, with like they were able to do mini camps and things like that. But the 2020 draft class was very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, a 2020 draft class, anyone that graduated from high school or college in 2020, I mean, everything was so shaken up. Now, as a free agent, so you know, you get cut when they cut down to 80. What's next? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, what's the thought process of like, what are we doing next?
Yeah, so I guess the nice part about having an agent is like they kind of guide you through that next process. You know, they give you some scenarios of what might happen, what might not happen, all the things that they try to give you the options. And so you talk about practice squad possibly, you talk about another team picking you up, talk about workouts, tryouts, all that stuff. And so again, that year was really weird. Once you got kind of out of the system, it was very hard for teams to then pick you up. So if they tried you out, they had to quarantine you for a few days just to try you out. And if they didn't like you, then you still have to stay in the hotel. Then they send you back.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like almost a week process just to get a 1-day workout, which like this last year, again, the restrictions changed. The 2021 year, the restrictions for workouts changed. So like when I worked out with Dallas in 2021, it was a 1-day thing.
Yeah.
I was in the airport longer than I was in Dallas. So they fly you in, they fly you out. So like that process has changed because quarantine, make sure, you're not coming in and giving it to the team because, we saw with like the Broncos or things like that, those close contacts, they had these little tracers that were, about that big there. They would sit there and they would not beep, but flash if you were too close to someone.
Yeah.
And so like they had all these tracers, and that's why the Broncos ended up not having to play with, they had to play with like a wide receiver that one game. So like those contacts, they really come into play. And so if you're the guy, you're bringing a workout guy in, and you bring in a workout guy and he gives it to, one of your starters, it's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to play this week? Yeah. So it was so weird. So that whole year, a lot of it was just waiting around, seeing what changed with the restriction and things like that. And I had gotten out of it. So from there, coming up that next season, we did mini camps, which again, they changed it. So it was actually in-person mini camp. So we were able to practice and things like that. And that's where I did a mini camp with the Raiders. I did a mini camp with the Broncos, got signed to the Broncos. And so it was very, very different from one year to that, the 2020 to the 2021. Yeah. All of a sudden I was playing football again, which I was like, I got there with the Raiders. Oh, this is a ton of fun. I miss playing football, miss being out there on the field.
Yeah. Now, so 2021, you end up training with the Broncos, the Vikings, and the Raiders. What are each of those experiences like? Are you starting to see the speed of the NFL? Are you starting to see a little bit of what the change in competition is? I mean, what's the whole, like you're saying, the 2020 season, very different. 2021, you're actually getting to play some football with these NFL teams. I mean, what is that like for you?
Yeah, first off, I kind of mentioned it was a lot of fun just to be out there on the field again. I think one of the biggest things that I didn't realize I would miss so much is just being around the guys. Yeah. Being in that locker room, having fun, talking to the guys, getting to meet all these different people from across the world. That's what makes football so great is like you have a guy from, Mississippi, you'll have a guy out there from Ohio, Southern California, New York, and you're all coming together and you're being on the same team and you got to operate this offense or defense and all that. So it's this awesome, be able to meet these guys, talk to them, get to know where they went to college, how they grew up. And so to me, that was the most fun part. And then you get out there on the field and you're like, man, these guys are good.
Yeah.
These guys, or for me, one of the biggest changes was like how big some of the offensive line. I was like, whoa, I'm glad you're protecting me.
Yeah.
So it's awesome to kind of meet all those guys and operate. And then once you get out there on that field, everyone is so good. Like I talked about earlier, it's like, those mistakes and things like that, they really stick out. And so it's almost so obvious and you can tell, who's been training a lot, who hasn't been training. And so it's high intensity, but it is a lot of fun to be out there training with those guys.
Yeah. Now for you, back to free agency. So now what is the process like? The season is in play right now. You're a free agent, working out, staying in shape, staying in contact with teams. I mean, what is the whole process like of preparing for when the next opportunity is going to come?
Yeah, so that is the toughest part, I guess, is kind of not knowing when you might get a call. So the training kind of changes a little bit for me. I try to stay in shape, work out, throw without kind of killing myself, right? So like there's not a day where I sit there and like I'm super sore the next day, because if I am and I get a call, then it's like the scout's not going to care when you go, oh, I just did squats yesterday. Can you guys get me, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, there's no excuses. So you got to sit there, you got to stay in shape. So I kind of act like I still am in season, even though I'm not, because if you get a call, you know, you want to be in season shape, but also you want to be healthy, ready to roll. So I'm not going to try to beat up my body too much. And then the toughest part is just finding people to throw, finding, you know, places to throw and all that stuff. Because high schools are practicing right now. Junior colleges are practicing right now. The NFL obviously practicing right now. So you're like when I go back to NEU and I visit my fiance, you know, I'm not going to sit there and pull the college guys after practice and go, hey, can you come run routes for me after your 2-hour practice, right? So like it is kind of hard to find these guys, because the normal guys you would throw with during that off season are playing football. And you know, and it's a lot to ask of them to sit there and then change their schedule for you, you know, when they're trying to win games for their team, you know, so it's a big ask. So trying to find guys is really tough. And, you know, it's there's been days where, you know, you can't find someone to throw and you need to throw that week, and I'll just sit there, hey, Dad, just stand here, and I'll just go out there and throw, you know, or hey, you know, brother, can you just stand here and catch these balls? So there's just times that happens, and that's kind of, I guess, the life of an NFL free agent. If there's anyone watching and you live in the LA area, hit me up to throw, right?
There you go, man.
But that's the toughest part is trying to find those guys in those similar situations as you.
Yeah. And what is it like too? I mean, I have to imagine being a free agent in season while everyone else, like you're saying, it's hard to find guys to throw with, and you're having to self-motivate as well, right? I mean, I'm assuming that throughout high school, throughout college, even though you're given more and more freedom, even with like an NFL camp, you're on a schedule that's kind of prepared for you, and now you're kind of coming up with it for yourself. I mean, how do you stay motivated? How do you kind of determine what the best things to do on each day are?
Yeah, I think luckily I've had really good coaches throughout like my whole career, from high school to college, all the strength coaches I've worked with the NFL. So like you kind of can piece together those that you've learned before. So meaning like the days that you're trained, right? So 4 days a week, I try to get a lift in of some sort. If it's 3, it's okay. I try not to do 5. Like I said, try not to get sore too much. And then one of the best decisions I ever made was I kind of bought some workout bands and things like that. So that kind of keeps me loose, keeps me ready, keeps me flexible and things like that. So doing those things is probably one of the more important things you can do, because the schedule, you can kind of piece it together, you know, through your experience that you've had. And then throwing wise, 4 to 5 times a week, you know, you just try to find those days. You know, if I'm getting too sore, if I'm throwing too much, it's pretty easy to realize, okay, let's just go 4 days a week, 4 days a week. You know, if I go 5 or 6, it's like, okay, you know, next week, let's just go 4. So that part, it's not too difficult because I've been so lucky with the people that I've worked with in the past.
Yeah. Now for yourself, having been to a couple of different camps now, having, you know, played with a couple of different teams now, what do you see for yourself as the jump or the improvements that you're working on that is going to get you on the field on Sundays?
Yeah, I think from 4 different teams, I've had to learn 4 different offenses.
Yeah. And
so I think for me now, being a younger guy, I now have a selling point of like, hey, I've learned 4 different offenses. And so I've been thrown into situations like with the Vikings, I tried out on Monday. 2 hours later, I was in practice for the Vikings. And so it was a situation where, you know, that was one of the most confused I'd ever been on the field, because I'd sit there, I was working out for them, I was in one meeting, and then I'm sitting there trying to throw their routes and combinations and things like that. So being able to deal with adversity still, even now, I think is something I've learned a lot from. And so, you know, I've been thrown in some of the weirdest situations as that free agent guy, and doing mini camps and getting cut and all this stuff. So I've gone through a lot, which it's only been a 2-year career for me so far. And it kind of, I've rode the wave a little. So, and now I kind of know what it takes. Yeah. And so for me, I realized it's like, you know, the mental side is huge. So if I can get over that hump and get to those preseason games, I think I can showcase my talents enough.
Yeah. Now, and you are a young guy, you know, 2 years in, you've got, plenty of time left, and you are a young guy. Have you been in any situations yet, going to some of these teams, jumping into practices where you're seeing guys that you're a little awestruck by? It comes to mind, I'm a big fan of Hard Knocks, and I remember a few years ago when they were doing Houston, and I think his name was James Charles. He's, a free agent cornerback, and he gets to meet Drew Brees. He's like blown away by it. Like, have you had any experiences like that?
I think for me, there's been a few guys where like I don't realize either how like big or how like short or like how tall they are, and so when you meet them in person, you're like, oh. Like, you're like, I didn't realize you were kind of like that, like, because all the guys are super nice and super helpful. But I think like you meet some of those guys and you're like, you're not kind of what I pictured.
Yeah.
Or you're like, your voice is a little different than what I expected. And so, because like I said, I was with the Raiders, Derek was such a nice guy to me and all this stuff. And that was something where like, he was just like every guy in that room. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are just the nicest guys in the world. And not saying that I didn't expect them to be nice, but I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, it's such a good room to be a part of. And I was sitting there in the Broncos and I met a few guys and I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, like you see these guys or like Saquon. When I saw Saquon for the first time in New York, not that he would know me at all, because I was only there for a couple of weeks in person, right? All we met was over Zoom. And so I think that was one of the things too. Because like you see the videos of Saquon and his quads are like just this big and all that stuff, but like he's not a normal height guy. Yeah. And he's but he's like you see his quads, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy could like, just run me over in no second. Yeah. But like you don't realize the size of some of these guys because you see them on TV and they just look jacked, and they still are. Like, and then you'll see some of the linemen. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, you're a big dude. Yeah. You're a full 6'7". Okay.
Yeah.
Let's be friends.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Now as we wind down, I have to ask, and I'm an eternal optimist, man. And I'm as we're talking, I believe it's gonna happen for you. What's it gonna mean to you when it sticks, when you make a team, when you're on the field playing in an NFL game?
Oh, that's it's an easy question, but at the same time it's so difficult because I think I've been through so much through my whole career. Just being able to play in that Raiders preseason game, it meant a lot to me. But I think after playing in that one, I think I was hungry for more. Yeah. Where now I got just a little taste of it, and I just I want to be able to showcase my skills more, and I think it would mean so much because of all the hard work and hours you put into this game and the training and all that stuff. So it's tough to, I guess, describe, but it would mean a ton. And for me, I just know if I get a couple more plays, I'll want a couple more. So it's just like, oh man, like this is awesome being out there on the field, operating the offense and all that stuff. Yeah.
Now, last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody that comes on the pod as the last question. What has sports done for you in your life?
Oh wow, it's completely changed my life. And that goes for every sport. I've played soccer, I've played volleyball, I've played baseball, I've played basketball, I've played football. I think sports teaches you things that especially as a kid, that you might not be able to learn without sports. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, learning to deal with success, winning games, learning to deal with failure, having a little bit of pressure put on you. Even when you're a kid, you're sitting. I remember times when I was sitting there at home plate, like, okay, I kind of got to get a hit here. There's a little pressure that the pitcher's throwing some gnarly stuff, and you're like, oh man, like here we go. So you kind of get put in situations that are a little intense. But as they're fun, right? You're playing a game when it comes down to it, right? And so you can learn so much from sports, and I think it's taught me to be a better person, a better man, and hopefully a better husband, and hopefully eventually a better father, and all that stuff. So for me, it's changed my life.
Awesome. Well, Case, thank you so much for stopping by the pod, man. Congrats on all your accolades and good luck with the future. I think it's very bright for you. That's all the time we got here. Thank you so much for you guys listening. Thank you so much for you guys watching. If you want to check us out, Instagram, we are at Cannon Sports. TikTok, we are at Cannon Sports Official. Check us out, cannonsports.com, for all of your sporting goods needs. Case, Cookus, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We will see you guys next time.